Why do we crave approval in the first place? And what does it cost us when we live for others' validation? From the moment we are born, approval becomes a currency. A baby cries, and when someone responds, it feels safe. A child brings home a drawing, and the smile or praise from a parent reinforces the idea that worth comes from recognition. This conditioning starts early, so it is no surprise that as adults, many of us are still chasing the nod, the pat on the back that says, "You're enough." The craving for approval is deeply tied to our need for belonging. Human beings are wired to connect, to be part of a group, to avoid rejection. Thousands of years ago, being excluded from a tribe meant death. Today, exclusion may not kill us physically, but it threatens our identity. We equate approval with acceptance and disapproval with abandonment. So we adapt, shape, shift, and bend ourselves to fit the mold others want, believing that is the only way to survive. But the cost of this survival mechanism is steep. When we live for approval, we hand over the pen that writes our story to someone else. Every decision, every move becomes less about what we value and more about what will keep us liked. It looks harmless at first, posting for likes, agreeing to things we don't want, seeking validation before taking a step. But over time, it erodes self-trust. We stop hearing our own voice. Living for others' validation creates a cycle of dependency. The rush of approval feels good, like a quick hit of dopamine. But it never lasts. The moment passes, and we're left needing more. It becomes addictive, and the more we chase it, the emptier we feel. Like a treadmill that speeds up as we run, we can never get off because we fear the silence of disapproval. The irony is that the more we chase approval, the less respected we feel. People-pleasing may earn temporary acceptance, but it rarely builds deep respect. True respect, both from others and ourselves, comes when we are clear about who we are and consistent in living that out. Seeking approval does the opposite. It makes us inconsistent, always shifting to meet someone else's expectation, never truly grounded. There's also a hidden cost in creativity and growth. When we crave approval, we avoid risks that might bring judgment. We censor ourselves, afraid to fail, afraid to be seen as different. We give up on bold ideas, settle for safe choices, and shrink ourselves to fit the comfort of others' approval. What's left is a watered-down version of who we could be. The constant pursuit of approval also breeds anxiety. Imagine walking into every room wondering, will they like me? Will they approve? It creates a pressure to perform, to wear masks, to edit ourselves in real time. The exhaustion is heavy. And worst of all, it convinces us that love and acceptance are things we must earn instead of something we inherently deserve. So the question isn't just why we crave approval. It's whether we are willing to pay the cost it demands. Because every time we trade authenticity for validation, we may gain a smile, like, or an applause, but we lose a piece of our self-respect. Redefine success shifting from pleasing people to living by your own values as the true measure of worth. For most of us, success was defined before we had the chance to define it ourselves. Parents, teachers, culture, all had a script. Get good grades, find a stable job, buy a house, earn recognition, and maintain the image of a respectable life. And if you did all of that, you were considered successful. But notice how much of that script depends on how others perceive you, not how you perceive yourself. The danger in letting others define success is that it creates a constant moving target. One moment, success looks like money. The next, it looks like a promotion. Then it becomes the approval of peers or the admiration of strangers. The definition keeps shifting because it was never rooted in your values. It was borrowed. So you keep running, chasing, but never arriving, because what you're chasing isn't truly yours. Redefining success begins with a simple yet radical question: what actually matters to me? Not what looks impressive on a resume, not what earns applause in a room, but what aligns with my values, my principles, my vision of a meaningful life. When you pause long enough to answer honestly, you may find that your definition looks very different from the one you inherited. When success is tied to values, it becomes stable. If your value is growth, then success is measured by how much you've learned, not how much you've earned. If your value is integrity, then success is about staying true to your word, even when it costs you. If your value is contribution, then success lies in how you've impacted others, not how many followers you have. The outer world can fluctuate, but your compass stays steady. This shift also changes how you handle failure. If success is measured by pleasing people, then failure is inevitable, because you can never please everyone. But if success is measured by your values, then failure becomes feedback. You didn't lose, you learned. You didn't get rejected, you got redirection. The measurement is no longer external approval, but internal alignment, and that makes all the difference. Living by your own definition of success also frees you from comparison. When success is about living your values, there's no need to measure yourself against someone else's highlight reel. Their version of success may be wealth, while yours is freedom. Their version may be recognition, while yours is peace. When you define it for yourself, there's no competition, only clarity. This redefinition doesn't mean ignoring external achievements, it means reordering them. Money, titles, recognition. They can still be part of your journey, but they're no longer the foundation. They become outcomes, not identities. You can enjoy them without being enslaved to them, because your true worth is already anchored in living authentically. The real challenge is courage. Courage to step away from the old definitions, courage to disappoint some people along the way, courage to honor your values even when the world doesn't applaud. Redefining success isn't just an intellectual shift, it's a lived choice. Every day, you choose whether to measure yourself by approval or by alignment, and that choice determines the story of your life. The trap of external validation, how chasing approval keeps us dependent and insecure, like running on a treadmill that never stops. External validation feels good in the moment. A compliment, a like, a promotion, a nod of recognition, it gives us a surge of satisfaction. But that satisfaction is short-lived. The praise fades, the applause stops, and suddenly we're left craving the next hit. It's a cycle that never ends because the source of our worth is always outside of us, always dependent on someone else's reaction. The trap is subtle. At first, seeking validation looks like motivation. You work harder because you want to impress your boss. You dress a certain way because you want approval from peers. You adjust your words because you want acceptance from friends. But underneath it all, the driving force isn't authenticity, it's fear. Fear of being overlooked, fear of being rejected, fear of not being enough unless someone else says so. The more we depend on validation, the more insecure we become. That may sound contradictory, but it's true. When our self-worth is tied to external feedback, we lose the ability to trust ourselves. We begin second-guessing every decision. Will they like this? Will they approve? Will they think I'm good enough? The result is paralysis. Instead of moving boldly, we tiptoe carefully, waiting for a signal from others to tell us we're okay. Living this way is like running on a treadmill that never stops. You're expending energy, but you're not actually moving forward. You work tirelessly to gain approval, but the destination always moves further away. The treadmill speeds up, demanding more effort, yet giving nothing lasting in return. And the longer you stay on it, the harder it becomes to step off, because your identity has been built on being liked. This dependence also leaves us vulnerable to manipulation. When someone knows you crave approval, they can withhold it to control you. They can use criticism or silence to keep you chasing, always working harder to earn back their validation. In this way, external validation doesn't just make you insecure, it makes you powerless, handing over control of your choices to someone else's opinion. Another cost of this trap is authenticity. When you chase validation, you begin to edit yourself to fit the approval of others. You laugh when you don't find something funny, you agree when you don't actually agree, you say yes when you want to say no. Piece by piece, you trade away your true self in exchange for the fleeting comfort of being accepted. And over time, you forget what your unaided voice even sounds like. External validation also breeds comparison. If your worth comes from approval, then you're constantly measuring yourself against others to see who's getting more attention, more likes, more recognition. This comparison erodes confidence because there will always be someone doing better in the eyes of others. Instead of celebrating your unique path, you diminish it, believing it's only valuable if it looks as good as someone else's. Perhaps the greatest trap of all is that external validation convinces us that we are never enough as we are. It whispers that worth must be earned, not lived. It teaches us that we must perform, impress, and conform just to be accepted. And so we keep running faster and faster, exhausting ourselves for approval that was never meant to define us in the first place. The power of self-respect is an internal contract. Choosing actions aligned with your principles even when no one is watching. Self-respect begins with the quiet agreement you make with yourself. It's not about grand gestures or public recognition. It's about the standards you hold when no one is looking. It's the internal contract that says, I will not betray my values for convenience, approval, or fear. This contract is invisible to others, but it shapes everything you do because it defines the foundation of your integrity. When you live by this contract, self-respect becomes a compass. It doesn't eliminate mistakes, but it ensures you learn from them without losing yourself. It keeps you steady when external noise tries to pull you off course. The world may applaud or criticize, but your actions aren't dictated by the crowd, they're guided by your principles. That steadiness is what gives self-respect its power. Self-respect isn't about arrogance or superiority. It isn't about thinking you're better than others, it's about honoring yourself enough to live in alignment. It's knowing that your worth is not negotiable, and therefore your behavior should reflect that truth. You don't cut corners because it would betray your standards. You don't lower your boundaries because it would compromise your dignity. You hold firm, not for recognition, but for yourself. One of the clearest signs of self-respect is consistency. Do you keep promises to yourself the same way you keep promises to others? Do you show up for your own goals with the same commitment you give to external obligations? Many people betray themselves daily, showing up for others while neglecting their own needs. Self-respect reverses that pattern, teaching you that your word to yourself matters just as much as your word to anyone else. This internal contract also builds resilience. When you respect yourself, you are less shaken by criticism or rejection. Of course, those things still sting, but they don't define you. You know who you are, and you trust the choices you've made because they align with your principles. That trust becomes an anchor, keeping you grounded when external approval is absent. Another strength of self-respect is clarity in decision-making. Life is full of gray areas and difficult choices, but when you have defined principles, the path becomes clearer. You ask, does this decision honor my values? Does it align with who I want to be? If the answer is no, then the choice becomes simple, even if it's hard. That clarity saves you from the confusion that comes when decisions are based on pleasing others. Self-respect also deepens the way you relate to others. When you respect yourself, you set the standard for how others treat you. You no longer tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or dishonesty because your internal contract demands more. And paradoxically, the more you respect yourself, the more genuinely others respect you. Not because you sought their approval, but because they see you living with authenticity and strength. At its core, the power of self-respect is freedom. Freedom from chasing approval, freedom from compromising your values, freedom from the exhausting cycle of pretending. It's the freedom to live in alignment with who you are, whether anyone notices or not. And that freedom is the foundation of a life lived with dignity, courage, and authenticity. Courage over conformity, building self-respect by standing for what matters to you, not what others expect. Conformity feels safe because it gives us the illusion of belonging. When we dress the way others dress, think the way others think, and act the way others act, we blend in. We avoid conflict, we avoid judgment. But the safety of conformity often comes at the cost of authenticity. Every time we silence what we believe to fit in, we shrink a little, and over time, we lose sight of who we really are. Courage, on the other hand, is risky. It asks us to step away from the crowd, to stand up for what matters, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Courage doesn't guarantee applause. It often brings criticism. Yet courage is the soil where self-respect grows. Every time you choose courage over conformity, you're telling yourself, my truth is worth more than their approval. That message strengthens the foundation of who you are. The temptation to conform is everywhere. At work, it might mean staying silent when you see something wrong because speaking up could make you unpopular. Among friends, it might mean laughing at a joke that offends your values because you don't want to be the outsider. In your family, it might mean following a path that isn't yours because it's what's expected. These choices may seem small, but every act of conformity chips away at your self-respect. Standing for what matters to you doesn't mean being rebellious for the sake of rebellion. It means aligning your actions with your principles, even when the easier path is to conform. Sometimes it looks quiet, like refusing to gossip when everyone else is. Other times it looks bold, like challenging an injustice at personal risk. The common thread is this: your choices reflect your values, not just the crowd's expectations. Courage also redefines what belonging means. Conformity says belong by being like them. Courage says belong by being fully yourself. And while courage may lose you some connections, the ones that remain are deeper and more genuine. People may not always agree with you, but they will know where you stand, and that authenticity is the foundation of meaningful relationships. The paradox of conformity is that it never fully delivers on its promise. You may gain approval in the short term, but it's conditional. It lasts only as long as you keep performing. Courage, though riskier, builds something lasting. The respect you gain from yourself when you act with integrity is not conditional. It stays with you even in silence, even when no one else notices. It's important to remember that courage is not the absence of fear. Fear is natural when you risk disapproval. Courage is acting anyway, choosing alignment over acceptance, principles over popularity. And with each act of courage, fear loses its grip and self-respect grows stronger. Choosing courage over conformity is not a one-time decision, it's a daily practice. In every conversation, every choice, you are presented with a moment: will I shrink to fit, or will I stand in my truth? The answer to that question, repeated over time, is what shapes the story of your self-respect. Boundaries is self-respect in action. Learning to say no without guilt is a declaration of self-worth. Boundaries are often misunderstood. Many people think they are walls meant to push others away, but in reality, boundaries are bridges that protect relationships by making them healthier. They are not about controlling others, they are about declaring what is acceptable for you. And when you set them, you're not being selfish. You're practicing self-respect. Saying no is one of the clearest expressions of a boundary, yet for many, no feels heavy with guilt. We fear that refusing a request will make us look unkind, unhelpful, or unworthy of love. But every time we say yes when we mean no, we trade authenticity for approval. That trade may win us temporary acceptance, but it costs us peace, energy, and respect for ourselves. Boundaries are not punishments. They are declarations of worth. When you say, I can't take on more work right now, you're saying your time and energy matter. When you say, I won't allow disrespect in this relationship, you're saying your dignity matters. Every boundary is a line drawn in alignment with your values, and each one reinforces the truth that you deserve to be treated with respect. The fear of setting boundaries usually comes from the fear of disappointing others. But disappointment is not the same as harm. People may not like your no, but they will survive it. What's more, the people who truly value you will respect your boundaries, even if it takes time. And those who refuse to respect them reveal something important about whether they deserve a place in your life. Living without boundaries leads to resentment. When you constantly say yes out of guilt or fear, you overload yourself. You become exhausted, stretched thin, and quietly bitter toward those you keep accommodating. That bitterness poisons relationships. Boundaries, in contrast, create clarity. They allow you to give freely without resentment because you are giving from choice, not compulsion. Boundaries also model respect for others. When you uphold your limits, you invite others to do the same. It creates a culture of mutual honesty where needs can be expressed without shame. Instead of guessing or pretending, both sides know where they stand. That clarity builds trust, which is the backbone of authentic connection. Saying no without guilt requires practice. At first, it may feel uncomfortable, even scary, because you're breaking the habit of people-pleasing. But with repetition, it becomes easier. Each time you honor your limits, you strengthen the belief that your voice matters. Over time, the discomfort fades, replaced by confidence in your ability to stand firmly in your truth. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They are about letting the right people in. They filter out what drains you so you can protect what sustains you. They are the everyday actions of self-respect, proving not through words but through choices that your well-being, your dignity, and your values are not negotiable. Celebrate progress, not perfection, building respect through small wins, consistent effort, and self-acknowledgement. Perfection is a trap that convinces us we're never enough. It whispers that unless we achieve flawlessly, our efforts don't count. But perfection is an illusion. It keeps moving further away the closer we think we get. When we measure ourselves by perfection, we guarantee disappointment. Self-respect doesn't grow from chasing perfection, it grows from honoring progress. Progress is where growth lives. Every step forward, no matter how small, is proof that you are moving, learning, evolving. The power of celebrating progress is that it reinforces momentum. Instead of waiting for the perfect outcome, you acknowledge the effort you've already invested. That acknowledgement builds confidence, and confidence fuels consistency. When you focus on perfection, mistakes become shame. You hide them, fear them, and let them define your worth. But when you focus on progress, mistakes become information. They show you what works, what doesn't, and where you can improve. They no longer signal failure, they signal feedback. And respecting yourself means allowing space for mistakes without tearing yourself down. Self-respect deepens when you honor the commitments you keep with yourself, even in small ways. Waking up early one more day than last week. Saying no, once when you usually would have said yes. Completing a task you've been avoiding. These aren't perfection, they're progress. And every time you notice and celebrate them, you strengthen the belief that you can trust yourself to grow. Celebrating progress also protects against burnout. When you only reward yourself for massive achievements, you create long stretches of exhaustion with no recognition. But when you celebrate the small wins along the way, you replenish motivation. You remind yourself that the journey matters just as much as the destination, and that self-respect comes from how you show up daily, not just in peak moments. Another gift of celebrating progress is humility. Perfection often demands comparison. You measure your flawless image against someone else's. Progress, however, is personal. It's about how far you've come compared to where you started. It shifts the focus from competing with others to honoring your own growth, which keeps you grounded and authentic. Acknowledging progress also builds resilience. When setbacks come, and they always do, it's easy to feel like you're back at zero. But if you've been celebrating progress along the way, you have proof that you've grown, proof that you've overcome challenges before. That evidence gives you the courage to keep going, instead of giving up at the first sign of imperfection. Ultimately, progress is sustainable in a way perfection never will be. Perfection demands flawless outcomes. Progress simply asks for the next step. And with each step you take, each effort you honor, each small win you celebrate, you build self-respect brick by brick, not through flawless performance, but through consistent, authentic growth. Live authentically, the freedom that comes when you stop asking, will they approve? And start asking, does this honor me? Authenticity is not about being loud or rebellious, it's about being aligned. It's living in such a way that your words, actions, and choices reflect who you truly are, not who others expect you to be. When you live authentically, you no longer shift to fit the room. You bring the same self wherever you go. That consistency is where freedom begins. The constant question of, will they approve, is exhausting because it puts your identity in someone else's hands. You end up editing yourself, rehearsing your words, and monitoring every move for signs of approval or disapproval. It's a life lived on a stage with the spotlight controlled by others. Authenticity steps off that stage and asks a different question: does this honor me? When you shift the question, everything changes. Decisions that once felt confusing suddenly become clearer. If the job offer doesn't honor your values, the answer is no. If the relationship requires you to shrink or pretend, the answer is no. If the opportunity allows you to grow in alignment with your truth, the answer is yes. Authenticity simplifies choices because the standard is no longer popularity but integrity. Living authentically also strengthens relationships. When you show up as your real self, you attract people who resonate with you, not with your mask. The connections may be fewer, but they are deeper, because they are built on truth rather than performance. Authenticity filters out the superficial and makes space for relationships grounded in respect and trust. There is risk, of course. Living authentically means some people will disapprove. They may not understand your choices, they may even reject you. But that rejection is not a loss, it is clarity. It shows you cannot accept the real you, and it frees you from pretending for their approval. The cost of disapproval is far less than the cost of betraying yourself. Authenticity also nurtures peace. There is a weight that comes from constantly managing impressions, and when you put that weight down, the relief is immense. You no longer carry the burden of perfection or performance. You wake up knowing you only have one standard to meet, the standard of living in alignment with your values. That kind of peace cannot be bought with approval. Another gift of authenticity is energy. Pretending drains you because it requires constant effort. Being yourself, however, is sustainable. It flows naturally. The time and energy you once spent trying to gain approval can be redirected into creating, growing, and contributing in ways that actually matter to you. Authenticity doesn't just free your mind, it frees your potential. To live authentically is to honor the truth that your worth is not up for negotiation. Approval may come and go, but integrity stays. When you stop asking, will they approve? And start asking, does this honor me? You step into a life of freedom, dignity, and self-respect, a life that is yours in the truest sense.